in an extraordinary intervention from a senior royal, Prince William has called for a ceasefire in Gaza, posting a statement on Twitter. The Prince of Wales said too many people have been killed and that he wants to see an end to the fighting as soon as possible.
Still with us is political editor of the Daily Express, Sam Lister. We touched on this at the start of the programme, but I mean, this is sort of coming off the back of a lot of people now in the West. I think, what did you say this morning, that basically everyone in Europe has now
every
voted
European
for a
parliament, apart from Britain, has voted for a ceasefire.
But of course, that is potentially coming up tomorrow with the SNP tabling a motion. So it is sort of in tune with, I think, really, the sort of lack of enthusiasm for supporting Israel that the West once showed. But it does strike me as an extraordinary potential breach of protocol to get involved in geopolitical affairs like that.
Yeah, it's certainly on the line, isn't it? The tradition is the royal family do not get involved in politics, and obviously the conflict we're seeing out in the Middle East is so hugely divisive and political that it's quite interesting that they've decided to step into this field, and he's decided to make this comment. I'm interested to know who his audience is, though. Who is this statement aimed at? Because clearly, I don't think anybody in Gaza or Israel is going to be listening to this.
Who makes these decisions? Because, you know, if you believe that fictional documentary, whatever it is, fictional programme on Netflix, The Crown, governments in the past have sort of deployed the royals as ways of sending forth the government message. And I wonder if this has sort of come from government, come from someone in, the royal circles, or come from William himself.
Because if it's the government, that's wrong. They should not be using the royal family to deploy their political messages.
Yeah, and it would be very interesting to know, I'm sure we'll learn more this afternoon from Downing Street as to what their knowledge of this statement was beforehand. I think, essentially, I think it will be a palace thing rather than a Downing Street thing. I think that would be quite a shocking thing if Downing Street was involved in any way in this. But I just think it is interesting that he has decided to take this decision now.
We have this vote potentially tomorrow, don't we, with the SNP motion. And so depending what tack the Conservative Party, the government of this country, take on this, I mean, Labour have sort of watered down their amendments by saying they want a humanitarian ceasefire on condition of all the hostages being released, etc., etc. But depending what tack the Conservative government take, we could actually end up with having the future head of state having a contrary opinion to that of his government.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's been quite careful in his language to say he hopes for the war to stop soon, that he hopes for the fighting to stop soon, rather than saying, I want an immediate ceasefire. I think that would be another level. He hasn't gone quite that far. He's been quite careful in the language. It amounts to the same thing, let's be honest, but it's just the way you put it forward.
I'm conflicted about this. I mean, I think this is an abuse of his position. However, if we're going to have a royal family, do we really just want people who cut ribbons and plant ceremonial trees, So in some ways, I think it's an interesting use of royalty, but it is certainly setting out in a new direction. Her Majesty the Queen would not have allowed this.
I don't think we would have seen this kind of statement, I think that's for sure. But I think we did see that under Prince Charles, when the King was Prince Charles, we did see him push those boundaries a little, if we can put it that way.
The green claptrap.
Exactly. Prince and actually, a lot of people did not like that, and so he had to kind of step back when he became king.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a Democrat. I'll take the word and the opinions of people I vote for. I'm not so sure that I want to take the opinion of aristocrats I did not vote for.
And to be involved in something so divisive and so difficult as this conflict, it's a very tricky terrain to get involved in.
Absolutely.
By the way, let's talk about... so we've got Labour are very much railing back from the SNP proposal, which will be read tomorrow, and that is that there's an immediate ceasefire. Labour, Keir Starmer, to his credit, they're just saying as long as Hamas don't release the hostages, then Israel's got a right to fight on.
They go further than that. They say Hamas must release all the hostages and guarantee, or Israel must be suitably assured that 7th of October cannot happen again. I mean, that almost basically is an impossible, frankly speaking.
And meanwhile, we've got America, of course, calling while proposing a UN Security Council resolution calling for a temporary ceasefire. So Biden is backtracking furiously. Obviously, Rishi Sunak suddenly last week started talking about a ceasefire. I wasn't aware that was government policy. I thought government policy was that Israel had a right to defend itself. So all around the world, people are losing their taste for this conflict, aren't they?
I think that is true, because obviously people can see the absolute human misery. I mean, nobody wants to see innocent civilians being slaughtered in the way that has happened. And it is completely horrifying to people. But clearly, there is a reason why this is happening, and we must not forget that. And those hostages still are being held. Yeah. And Hamas could release those hostages. And that's something that has to be kind of...
A lot of people
talking about humanitarian aid, I think a lot of that is also slightly within the gift of Hamas. When you look at the amount of money they've got as a terrorist organisation, you put the two leaders of Hamas's wealth together, and it's more than the GDP of Gaza.
Do they care about their own people? This is a question that needs to be asked.
Yeah.
I think
I don't think they do, and that's why some of us still stand with Israel, because whilst of course we all deplore and hate to see all the human suffering and all the people dying, particularly women and children, obviously, I actually would like Israel to complete its mission and fully destroy Hamas.
I think many people would agree with that, but it's such a difficult thing. And I think we have to remember, it doesn't actually matter what our governments say about this, because that will not stop this.
Yeah.
And so the SNP's debate tomorrow, they basically are using this as a political football. They want to be able to force Labour MPs and Conservative MPs into a position so that they can put this on their election leaflets. And actually, what happens tomorrow will have no bearing on international relations, what happens in the Middle East whatsoever. It's about SNP playing politics in Westminster.
Well, I think neither will William Hague's calls for frozen Russian assets to be redirected to Ukraine. I doubt that is plausible.